Well, the number one thing that I'm going to do if I get elected, I'll tell you, I'm going to throw a cocktail party at my house, and I'm bringing all of the councillors and the mayor over to my home. And I'm calling it Raise the White Flag. And what we're going to do is we are going to agree to get along and to put the partisan political behavior aside. It's time that City Hall operates with a team. There is not a team in place there. It's a lot of division.
I would say we have to, you've got 44 councillors in the TTC and everybody's voting and everybody's got their own issues for their own places. Make a subcommittee, a TTC subcommittee, mandate them to fix, give them challenges, mandate them to fix it in a certain amount of time, and task them to do that. If they can't, they're done, and we'll bring another subcommittee. We gotta fix the TTC. It has to be done. It's gonna hurt for a little while, but that's life. Once we fix it, it's for the future.
Gus?
You know, at the end of the day, we live in Canada, and we're covered in snow for the better part of the year, and cold and rain. We can't, you know, and our population is getting older. Standing outside to wait for transit, it doesn't really make much sense. Subways make sense. Even underground, the light rail, anything that goes underground, relieve the congestion on the streets, make it safer for bikes. Adding real value to a city, like this idea of a subway on Dufferin Street.
Where does the funding come for this?
Okay, this is the next point I was going to get to. If you have any property, commercial or residential, within 500 meters of that subway corridor is going to ultimately, instantly go up in value. Example, on Eglinton Avenue, I'm a mortgage agent. I was working on a property for a laundromat in a storefront, apartment in a storefront, which is a laundromat on Eglinton Avenue a couple years ago. List price was under $400,000. It sold, I'm sorry, under $300,000. It sold this year for almost $500,000 because of that, because of the subway basically going in on Eglinton. Again, so any property within a few hundred meters of any subway corridor is going to instantly raise in value. That increase in value, when the province reassesses your tax, your assessment, is going to increase your property taxes by a proportional amount to what your property value is worth. This increase over this 100,000 homes, or however many homes are going to be along this corridor, will subsidize the subway, if not pay for it over the next 20 years.
I just have to correct one thing about that. The way the MPAC system works, the province takes the average property value increase in the City of Toronto and increases you based on whether you're above or below that. We actually don't get any value capture. It's a serious problem. American cities do get value capture, but the way the provincial property assessment works, we don't benefit from value capture. The only time we get additional money is if there are brand new units built. And quite frankly, there aren't going to be enough brand new units to come up with the billions of dollars. I think what we have to do is be prepared to be honest. There is no free lunch for transit. If you want better service, and this is true of transit, police, ambulance, community centers, libraries, if you want better, you have to pay more. And I think we have to be brave enough and adult enough in the City of Toronto to say, well, we either need to increase taxes here or get the province to increase taxes or give us new room on the sales tax so that we can afford to build the infrastructure we need. The fact that we haven't had that conversation is what's really holding back the potential in Toronto.
Okay, this all will tie in for our next question. And Andres, you'll be up first, and we're talking about affordable housing in this city. All the increases in prices and everything like that. How do you manage to live here? Do you believe in building more affordable housing or granting subsidies to residents so they have more choice on where they live? And Andres, you're first.
Well, I understand like the current system is broken. The current revenue model is completely in shambles, where money's coming into the city, falls into general revenues and go anywhere and is spent in anywhere else in any sort of fashion. So what we need to do is come up with a system of direct taxation. Now, it's not going to be easy, but the Toronto District School Board has to consider some changes. So how can the city help the Toronto District School Board or any other co-ops who offer subsidized housing in the short term while they're making this transition from one that relies on grants, subsidies, and taxes to another? Perhaps a basic revenue guarantee for a couple of years, perhaps a $1-for-$1 match on any charitable donations these organizations receive. But we have to fix the funding model because it's not working.
Okay, Andres. Gord.
Well, I agree that we need to fix the funding model. Your specific question, though, was around rent supplements or direct investment. Yeah. I prefer direct investment either through the city's own agency or in partnership with social housing providers. And we've actually done a couple of really neat projects in Ward 14 over the last 6-7 years where social agencies have been providing housing with some help from government. I worry about rent supplements. We've actually had a very sad story recently in Parkdale where instead of putting someone who'd been supported through Streets to Homes into public or social housing, they were put into private, and within not a very long period of time, they were evicted. Now here's what happens. The government gives the rent sup. That doesn't go to the tenant, it goes to the landlord. The landlord makes money, they get tired of the tenant, they evict it. They keep the money, but we haven't solved the problem. And that's why I prefer social housing and public housing over rent supplements.
Okay, Gord, thank you very much. Charmaine.
Affordable housing is an issue. Certainly in Ward 14, it's an issue every single day. I think that one of the things that we need to focus on is perhaps working. We've got a lot of development happening within Ward 14. Perhaps we need to start having some conversations with developers. Perhaps we need to insist upon them creating a model that's much more similar to St. Lawrence, where we can have different communities living together. Perhaps within these new buildings, these new towers, we can have some affordable spaces. The bottom line is we do need to work together in order to create more affordable housing.
Okay, Charmaine. Tim.
I agree with that 100%. Housing is a problem all over Toronto, and it's only getting more expensive. And what can we do? I don't know the answers yet, but working with people and getting in the City Hall and figuring this out, that's what I'd like to do.
And Gus.
I've been operating a sports bar for a number of years, and I talked to a lot of people who are on, some people are on social assistance, and they have rent supplements, and the incentive for them, the affordable housing is available if they're not working. As soon as they start working, it doesn't become affordable. They have to start paying full pop for their place. So what's the incentive for them to work, right? So I think that, not to say that this happens all the time, but there could be better monitoring of maybe who has access to it. There's long lists of people waiting to get into, affordable housing. And the big issue that I think is going to be a problem in the next 10, 15 years are the elderly. They're not going to be able to afford to live downtown anymore. So we have to be able to move them into areas in the north end of the city where it's more affordable for them to live. Where they can, you can afford an apartment downtown, I think, is upwards of $1,700, for a month for rent. So this is not sustainable. Again, I get back to my moving people quickly to the north end of the city with underground transportation.
Okay. Gord, you look like you wanted to respond to what Gus said.
Well, actually, some of what Gus said was on my mind, but more I was noting that there's real vigorous agreement here as well. Tim and Charmaine both talked about the importance of working with developers. In the last several projects that we've had in Ward 14, we've got a chunk for affordable housing. We now have, I'm going to forget the number, something like $2 million for building new affordable units within Ward 14. The next step, I think, actually takes a legislative piece, which is getting the inclusionary zoning piece passed, which says that if you're going to build anywhere in Toronto, 10% must be affordable units. There's pretty near unanimous consent on City Council around that. There are some people who think don't interfere with the market, but most of us actually agree. And I know there have been various private member bills at Queen's Park. We need to get on, just make that a rule.
How do you ease concerns about something like that, the mix of housing within a unit? I know some people have some fears about it, other people go into it gangbusters.
Well, we can point to really successful examples like St. Lawrence. It's worked beautifully, very, very well. And we just have to continue to educate people and let them know, we're all okay to live together. This is the City of Toronto. We're diverse. There's a whole bunch of different people living within it. And you know what? We could all live within it very well. There are success cases, and we just need to focus on those.
It's funny you ask, because there was actually a report that was brought to the Planning Committee, I'm going to say 3 years ago, which looked at Parkdale as a model for how we handled legalizing and improving the quality of life in rooming houses through the Parkdale Housing Committee. And that brought together tenants, property owners, neighbors, and business people. And we sat down as a group and worked through property by property, cleaned up the problems, And now the planning department is saying, you know how they do it in Parkdale? That's how we should do it citywide. One of the things I think we'd all agree about here is because we have so much economic diversity, I like to point out we're the only ward that Statistics Canada has a census tract for in each income group. Because we're used to that, we actually know how to solve these problems. So I think there's a lot of resources here and throughout the community that the rest of the city could look on. I always say Toronto would be a lot better off if it was a lot more like Ward 14.
All right. Tim, you wanted to say
I
something?
was just going to say, living in the ward, and I would have there's all kinds of people, we know that living there, from all different kinds of backgrounds, and we all get together. So, and this is Toronto. Everybody's welcome. So no matter what happens, if we can get people in the houses, into buildings, and they're all different sort of economics, that's fine. This is Toronto. That's the point I was making there. So I don't think there's any concern with different kinds of people coming together, not in this city.
If I could just quickly say something,
Yes.
it just ties back into what I said at the introduction, that the city just lacks choices. I mean, why should we have this paternalistic approach to putting people into some kind of social housing when they're not given the choice to make decisions for themselves? I think we need to start reconsidering how social assistance works in this city in the form of basic revenue guarantees for a few years or a dollar-for-dollar match if in cases of charities.
All right, we'll move on now to our next question. And a recent report by the Fraser Institute stated on average Canadians are paying about 42% of their income on taxes and only 36% on food, clothing, and shelter combined. How do we make this city more affordable for people who want to stay here, want to move in here, and settle down here? Gord, you're first.
Well, I quibble with the Fraser Institute, but let's not waste time with that today. 8% of the taxes we collect in the City of Toronto stay in the City of Toronto. The other 92% go out of orders of government. And the problem we just talked about, affordable housing or transit or daycare, for example, is another one, is that the provincial and federal governments take the revenue and then they don't bring them back. We're the only country in the OECD with no national housing strategy. Toronto is the only transit system that doesn't have guaranteed annual revenue from either our federal or provincial governments in Europe or North America. Our daycare system is broken. Yes, taxes are collected, but the problem we're having in the City of Toronto is they go away and don't come back.
Okay. Charmaine.
I think that one of the things that we need to focus on within Ward 14, where that's applicable, is the growth of Ward 14. What's happening? We need to see a lot more support of our local businesses. I have been hearing from business owners along Ronsonsville, from business owners along Queen Street West, how difficult it is, how slow it is in terms of people coming in and visiting their stores. As a councillor, we need the leader of the council, that would be the Ward 14 councillor, to work with the businesses to help them because they are who are struggling. And there's an opportunity for us as well to create more jobs by working with our local businesses. I've been told that there's absolutely no support, and we need to be able to lend a hand and focus there.
Okay, Charmaine. Tim.
I'm sorry, I lost track there. What was the question?
How do we make the city more affordable?
Right, okay.
Our money's not staying here.
Our money's not staying here. It's a very good question, right? I actually don't know. That's the thing, I don't know. Obviously, everybody's facing this challenge, so we got to work together again, and I said this before, and that's what it's all about. We have smart people. Smart people have to find ways to keep the money in Toronto. I can help do that. We got to keep the money here. Local businesses, especially in Ward 14, along Queen Street West, I think it's barren. It needs more people. Bringing in that kind of money will help stimulate some economic growth, create jobs. That's what we have to do.
Okay. And Gus?
So how do we bring people to Toronto
How do we make it affordable
that
for
want to
them?
come here?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I want to go and live in California and lie on the beach all day long, or in Manhattan. You know, I'd love to live in the center of Manhattan, but I can't afford it. So I think we have to be more realistic. And someone that wants to come here, our main concern should be how do we keep people that are here, and not.
Well, I think that's the question. Is
you know, how does somebody want to come here and live in Toronto because they want to come to the big city? Well, if you can't afford to live